Hello, and welcome to this quiet corner. Somewhere above you, the sky is settling into its deepest shade of blue. Stars are pricking through the darkness one by one, but tonight the stage belongs to two glowing companions. Side by side, they hover, one familiar, the other just a little smaller, perhaps a touch more golden. They're like siblings sharing a gentle secret, each casting its own cool glow down to the sleeping world. Their light brushes the roof, spills into valleys, and turns the ocean's surface into a shifting quilt of silver. It's the kind of sight that would make even the most distracted nightwalker stop and whisper, "Wow." Where curiosity can slowly explore and science is free to grow, we find ourselves wondering, what if this wasn't just a dream? What if Earth had always had two moons, not one? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Tonight we're not staying in the present. We're going very far back. So far that even the world beneath your feet will seem unfamiliar. Now let's turn off the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's enjoy tonight's journey. The first thing you'd notice in this alternate world isn't just the beauty. It's the way their presence would subtly, but constantly remind you of something bigger than yourself. Two moons would mean two sets of shadows, each a little off from the other. Imagine walking down a path in the evening and watching your own shape, doubled the silhouettes, overlapping and separating with every step. One moon would give you that pale bluish light you know. The other might paint you in a softer, gold-washed glow. It wouldn't just be romantic or strange. It would be practical. Two moons would never both be in the same phase at once, not for long, so you'd rarely have a completely dark night. The balance between their cycles would make moonless evenings incredibly rare. For nocturnal animals, that would be a serious change. Some would thrive under the extra light. Foxes might hunt longer, owls might patrol wider ranges. Others might struggle. Small prey animals would have fewer chances to hide. Even in the gentle rocking of the sea, you'd feel their presence. Though we'll talk about tides in more depth later, even now you can picture the difference. That rise a little higher, beaches that vanish underwater more often, and a sense of the ocean breathing a bit faster. Fishermen in this world would have grown up reading a more complicated rhythm, and beachgoers would probably have two tide charts in their pockets. You can almost hear the poets of this earth writing about the twin eyes of the night, or the double crown above the sea. Imagine the paintings, ancient ones scratched onto cave walls, and modern ones filling living room walls of two moons, mirrored in still lakes like earrings dangling from the horizon. Of course, there's the simple human joy in lying back on cool grass and letting your gaze wander between the two. You might find yourself choosing favorites. Tonight, the smaller one is prettier, you might think, or look, they're lined up perfectly. Parents would point them out to their children as naturally as we now say. Look, there's the moon, and bedtime stories would be filled with tales of their creation, their rivalry and their adventures together in the great dark sea of space. And here's a curious thought: you wouldn't even realize anything was strange. In a world born with two moons, you'd never have known a sky with only one. Astronomers would still study them. Artists would still paint them. Lovers would still swear by them, but no one would think to ask why two. The idea of just one moon might feel as lonely to them as two feels wondrous to us. Now, before you drift too far into this sky picture, one last detail for tonight's scene. You're walking along a calm shoreline, the air warm and heavy with the scent of salt. Two paths of light stretch across the water, each leading to a different bright coin in the sky. Waves lap at your feet, and every so often a fish breaks the surface, splashing silver droplets under double illumination. The world is quiet, except for the heartbeat of the ocean, pulling you deeper into its rhythm. And somewhere in your mind, you start to wonder not just how it would feel to live here, but how this came to be. To understand how two moons could ever share the same sky, you have to step so far back in time that Earth itself is almost unrecognizable. The continents aren't in their current positions. The oceans aren't shaped the way you know them, and the air is thicker with the haze of volcanic breath. The planet is young, still recovering from the chaos of its own birth, and the solar system is a busy, sometimes violent neighborhood. In this imagined timeline, one moment changes everything. A massive object about the size of Mars hurtles toward the young Earth. This isn't just a slow cosmic nudge. This is a bone-rattling, planet-sculpting collision. The impact is so powerful that it tears loose a colossal spray of molten rock and debris. In our real history, that material swirled together to form a single moon. But here, in this alternate thread of reality, the aftermath plays out just a little differently. Instead of clumping neatly into one great sphere, the debris gathers into two dominant clusters. They spiral dance and pull at each other all the while, being tugged by Earth's own gravity. Over time, both clumps round themselves into moons. Maybe one is about 3/4 the size of the other, like a younger sibling that never quite caught up in height. The process isn't peaceful. In those early years, the two moons would pass dangerously close to each other, trading gravitational shoves that make their paths wobble. From the molten surface of the young Earth, any early ocean or even massive lava lakes would ripple under their pull. The sky would be filled not just with the glowing twins, but with glittering belts of leftover rock fragments, little reminders of the day Earth got its celestial companions. Here's an unusual fact for you. In our actual universe, astronomers believe that tiny mini-moons sometimes orbit Earth for a few months or years before drifting away. They're usually just rocks captured from space. In this alternate world, you'd have permanent siblings in the sky, two massive moons that would never leave. Over millions of years, the chaos would calm. The smaller moon might find a slightly faster orbit, so it laps the larger one regularly, creating a slow-motion chase across the heavens. You could stand on a beach and watch them drift toward each other from opposite sides of the night, passing like two silent ships before separating again. Some nights they'd be close enough that their light would blend into a brilliant double lantern almost bright enough to read by. Other nights they'd stand far apart, each ruling its own corner of the sky. And imagine the eclipses. With two moons, the chances of one passing in front of the sun would double, and sometimes they could even eclipse each other. Picture the sight of the smaller moon sliding in front of the bigger one, its edge rimmed in silver as sunlight bounces off the larger's surface. Early humans in this world would have been awestruck and maybe a little nervous whenever the twin lights overlapped, dimmed, or turned a haunting red in a lunar eclipse. There would also be practical consequences. Two moons would mean two tidal cycles overlapping and sometimes reinforcing each other. But even at this early stage in their history, long before humans walked the Earth, that extra gravitational influence would be shaping the oceans. Some coastal areas might have been battered into dramatic cliffs, faster than in our reality. Others might have seen wide, shifting tidal flats teeming with life. Marine evolution would take subtle but significant turns under the influence of these extra-strong, extra-frequent tides. From space, our double-moon Earth would be a striking sight. Against the backdrop of the blue oceans and green-brown continents, two bright spheres would orbit in a slow, graceful dance. The larger moon would likely be familiar in appearance, scarred with craters and marked by dark basalt plains. The smaller might have a more rugged, heavily cratered look, having less gravity to smooth out its surface over time. Together, they'd act like cosmic bookends, framing the Earth in a symmetry that any alien passing by might stop to admire. And here's a little light-hearted thought. If this had happened in real life, we might have had twice as many awkward man-on-the-moon jokes by now, and children might have to memorize double the number of moon facts in school. Astronauts would have to answer, "Which moon are you talking about?" whenever they announced a lunar mission. But right now, in this ancient alternate Earth, there are no astronauts. Only a young planet, two newborn moons, and a sky glowing brighter than ours ever did. The stage is set. The tides are beginning their complex dance. And the future, your future in this imagined history, will be shaped by that second pale companion in ways both subtle and vast. By the time Earth's crust has cooled enough to cradle the first seas and continents, the two moons have already been writing their influence into the rhythms of the planet. Tides, normally a gentle breathing in and out, have become a more complex choreography. Instead of one predictable rise and fall each day, you now have two separate pulls, sometimes combining in perfect harmony, sometimes working against each other in a slow cosmic push and pull. If you were standing at the edge of an ancient shoreline in this world, you wouldn't just see the tide creep in and out twice a day. You'd see smaller ripples within the larger cycle, a pattern like a double heartbeat. When both moons align in their tug, the waters surge higher than anything you'd ever see on single-moon Earth, what we might call a super tide. But when they pull in opposite directions, the sea's breadth becomes shallow, the water retreating so far that hidden reefs and sandbanks emerge like secret worlds. In this alternate timeline, these shifting shorelines shape the destiny of life itself. Early marine creatures that venture onto land find themselves with more frequent and varied opportunities. Twice as many low-tide windows mean twice as many chances for plants to colonize wet sand, for arthropods to scuttle across muddy flats, for fish-like vertebrates to flop toward their first breath of air. Evolution accelerates in unexpected directions, simply because the moon's gravity offers more experiments for nature to run. Here's an unusual but true bit of science. On our real Earth, the moon's tidal pull is believed to have played a role in the development of early land life. In this two-moon world, that effect would be magnified. Some species might have evolved to track one moon's cycle over the other, timing their spawning or feeding to the particular pull they've adapted to best. Others might rely on the interference patterns between the two special windows when tides are gentle enough for nesting or strong enough to flood inland pools. You can imagine early observers millions of years before humans responding to these cycles without knowing why. Shorebirds might gather when the moons stand opposite each other, their instincts tuned to the shallow tides that leave feast after feast of stranded shellfish. Marine mammals might chase the supertide to reach rich feeding grounds far up river mouths. Even coral reefs sensitive to the tiniest changes in water level and light would form in more intricate shapes to keep up with this restless tide schedule. And of course, the moon's combined pull wouldn't just shape the ocean, it would subtly flex the crust beneath your feet. The Earth's surface, believe it or not, actually rises and falls slightly due to the moon's gravity in real life by a few centimeters. With two moons, those tidal bulges in the solid ground would be larger and more complex. Volcanic regions might see slightly more frequent activity. Earthquakes could have a faint lunar rhythm, and certain minerals might crystallize differently under the extra stress. For early human ancestors in this imagined history, the tide would become an even greater teacher than in our reality. Living near coasts would mean learning two overlapping sets of rules. Children might be taught the songs of the water verses that list which moon phase brings which tide. And since the moon's orbits wouldn't be perfectly synchronized, the patterns would shift slowly over weeks, creating a moving puzzle that demanded both patience and memory. From a cultural point of view, that second moon would quickly become as important as the first in stories and symbols. Perhaps one would be associated with high energy, bold action, and floods, the other with stillness, retreat, and hidden dangers. Early coastal dwellers might carve the two discs into driftwood, hang them from fishing nets, or paint them on their shelters to ask for good catches. There's also the matter of how this double tide would shape landscapes. Estuaries, those rich in-between places where rivers meet the sea, would be even more dynamic. Twice as many tidal surges would mean faster erosion in some areas and more sediment buildup in others. Some coastlines might end up riddled with labyrinth-like channels, navigable only by those who knew both moons' rhythms. Others could grow vast salt marshes where migrating birds stop to rest and feed in glittering moonlight. And then, there's the humor of it. Imagine explaining to someone from this world what our tides are like. Only one moon, so you just have one tide schedule all year. How boring. In this double moon Earth tidal variety would be the norm, and our single moon predictability might seem downright primitive. If you close your eyes, you can hear it. The ocean breathing twice as often. Waves lapping against rocks, then pulling back with a sigh, as if the planet itself were keeping time to an invisible duet in the sky. The pull of two moons isn't just in the water, it's in the pulse of the world, a rhythm that every creature, plant and person, would learn to feel deep in their bones. As the two moons settle into their long-term orbits, their influence begins to stretch beyond tides into the very patterns of air and water that make up the planet's climate. You've felt a breeze before, the kind that brushes past you on a warm evening, but here in a world with two moons, the wind itself has been shaped differently for millions of years. It starts with the tides, of course. When the oceans breathe more forcefully, they carry heat around the planet in new ways. Picture this. The extra-gravitational pull from the moons stirs the oceans like two spoons, moving in overlapping circles. Warm tropical waters are pushed farther toward the poles. Cold polar currents reach deeper into the equator's realm. This reshuffling changes where clouds form, where rain falls, and even how ice caps grow or shrink. In certain regions, seasonal monsoons might be amplified by the extra tidal pumping. Imagine the warm winds of summer sweeping inland earlier, bringing heavier rains that feed enormous river systems. Elsewhere, the opposite might happen. Areas that rely on gentle currents for moisture could find themselves drying out, reshaping deserts and grasslands. Over millions of years, entire ecosystems would grow around these altered weather patterns. Here's an unusual fact. On our real Earth, the moon stabilizes the tilt of our axis, keeping the seasons relatively steady. With two moons, that stability could be even stronger, or depending on their orbits, slightly less so, adding tiny wobbles to Earth's tilt. Those small changes, magnified over time, might create mini ice ages, or brief warm spells that echo through history. In this two-moon climate, the nights are never truly dark. When one moon is new and invisible, the other might be waxing full, scattering silver light over hills and forests. That means cooler nighttime temperatures are a bit less extreme in some places, since the ground radiates heat differently under a brighter sky. Farmers in ancient times might notice frost coming later in autumn, or snow melting faster in spring, not because of magic, but because the moons change the way the world cools down at night. For early humans, this altered climate would be both a challenge and a gift. On one hand, coastal storms could be stronger, fueled by warmer, more active waters. A supertide combined with a monsoon could send walls of water inland, carving new river channels overnight. On the other hand, those same ocean currents could make some coastal regions surprisingly fertile, rich in fish, shellfish, and salt for trade. The moon's different orbital periods would create shifting patterns in the tides that might also subtly influence weather on a weekly or monthly scale. For instance, when the moons align for especially high tides, the churning could trigger bursts of plankton growth offshore, which in turn would attract fish, seabirds, and marine mammals. Hunters and gatherers living along the coasts might learn to anticipate these times, not just for fishing, but for when storms might be more likely to form out at sea. And the clouds, oh, the clouds in this world, would be a show all their own. The double moonlight would turn them into layers of silver and gold, at night, lit from two directions. Sometimes thin cirrus clouds might throw overlapping halos around each moon, creating delicate double rings. Other nights, thick storm clouds might hide one moon completely, while the other peeks out, spotlighting a single patch of rain falling in the distance. If you were to stand on a cliff in this world, you'd feel that the wind carries more stories than ours does. It smells of salt, carried farther inland, of flowers blooming earlier in spring, of fires lit against storms that gather more quickly than they do in our history. And when you look up, the moons are always there, sometimes side by side, sometimes far apart, but always whispering their gravitational influence into the climate you feel on your skin. A lighthearted thought. Well, weather forecasting in this world would be twice the headache. Meteorologists would have to say things like, "We're expecting rain on the third day after the large moon's full phase, and 2 days before the smaller moons." School children might grumble about memorizing both lunar calendars just to understand the forecast. And yet that complexity would be as natural to them as knowing the difference between summer and winter. The climate here is not just about sun and wind. It's a lunar masterpiece painted with 2 brushes, each stroke overlapping the other. And in this alternate history, every cloud that drifts across the sky, every breeze that turns a leaf carries with it a trace of that ancient collision and the twin orbs that have been shaping Earth's breath ever since. Nights in a 2-moon world would never feel quite the same as ours. Imagine stepping outside after sunset and finding not 1, but 2 glowing beacons hanging in the dark, each spilling its own distinct light over the land. The larger moon might shine with the bluish-white brilliance you're familiar with, casting sharp shadows and brightening distant hills. The smaller could bathe everything in a warmer honey-gold glow, softening edges and giving the night a dreamlike warmth. The 2 moons would never be in perfect sync. One might rise earlier in the evening, hanging low, while the other still hides below the horizon. Hours later, they could cross paths, drifting like slow ships in a black ocean, before parting ways again. On rare nights, both would be high and full at the same time, turning the entire landscape into something close to daylight, a double-lit world where the darkness retreats almost entirely. In this kind of light, the night has more layers. You'd see 2 sets of shadows wherever you walk, one crisp and pale, the other faint and amber angled slightly differently. Even a lone tree in a field would grow 2 dark shapes at its feet, swaying gently on the grass. The effect would be mesmerizing and at times disorienting. For humans, the practical effects would be immediate. People could travel safely at night without the need for as many torches or fires. Villages might work or celebrate later into the evening, their streets alive, under the moon's combined glow. Night markets could bustle with trade, while musicians play in courtyards, the scene lit naturally as if the heavens themselves approved of the gathering. But it's not just humans who would take advantage of this extra light. Nocturnal animals would adapt in fascinating ways. Predators like big cats might roam farther, able to stalk prey with greater accuracy. In turn, prey species might adjust their feeding times, becoming more active at the dimmer overlaps between moons. Some creatures could even evolve to rely on one moon's light over the other, developing sight better suited to its particular brightness and color. Here's a curious fact: in our world, sea turtles often hatch at night and head toward the brightest horizon, which is usually the moonlit ocean. With 2 moons, those instinctive journeys could be trickier. Hatchlings might find themselves aiming in slightly different directions, depending on which moon dominates the sky. Over thousands of years, their patterns would shift to match the new reality. There's also the beauty of the lunar phases. Since the 2 moons wouldn't share the same cycle, the combinations would be endless. One could be a thin crescent, while the other is nearly full, giving the sky a balanced asymmetry. Artists might find themselves painting 1,000 different versions of moonlight, because no 2 nights would look the same. And the romance, oh, the romance of it. Couples might choose special nights when both moons are waxing to plan weddings, believing that twin growing lights symbolize love that will flourish. Festivals could be held on the rare occasions when the moons align perfectly, their combined glow so bright it makes the stars seem shy. Still, there would be moments of eerie beauty, too. Picture walking through a foggy field when one moon is hidden behind clouds and only the other's light seeps through. The world would feel tilted incomplete, as if something important were missing from the sky. And then a break in the clouds reveals the second moon, and suddenly the balance is restored. In this alternate Earth, poets would have twice the inspiration, astronomers, twice the observations, and every child twice the wonder. Parents might tuck their children in with stories about the big sister and little sister moons, yet with its own personality. One bold and watchful, the other quiet and gentle. And those children would grow up never questioning the sight of two lights above them, just as you never question the presence of one. Lightheartedly, you can imagine arguments over which moon is better. Maybe certain sports teams or cities would adopt one as their emblem, sparking playful rivalries. The big moon folks are all traditionalists, someone might joke, but we small moon fans know who really lights up the night. In the end, nights in a two-moon world would not just be brighter, they'd be richer, more complex, filled with layers of beauty and meaning. And as the moons continue their endless orbit, they'd shape the way humans dream love and tell stories for as long as the sky exists. Life on Earth has always been a dance between sunlight and moonlight, but with two moons above evolution, would have learned a slightly different rhythm. Every creature that moves, feeds, hides, or hunts under the cover of night would be shaped by the constant shifting interplay of twin lights. In the forests, you'd hear it in the movements of small mammals. Mice and voles, which in our reality dart in and out of the underbrush during brief moments of darkness, would adapt to a sky that rarely offers complete shadow. Their fur might darken slightly, patterns evolving to break up their outlines in the extra light. Their predators, owls, foxes, wildcats, would gain keener eyesight, sharper reflexes, and perhaps even new hunting strategies to take advantage of the layered shadows. Out on the savannas, larger grazers might feed later into the night, comforted by the added visibility. But that same visibility is a gift to predators too. Lions or wolves could coordinate hunts under the double moons, their silhouettes blending with one moon's shadow, while the other moon's glow distracts prey. The eternal cat-and-mouse game would gain a new set of rules, dictated by the angles of two lights instead of one. And then there are the insects. In our world, many species use the moon as a navigation point, keeping it at a fixed angle to fly in a straight line. With two moons, this instinct would be thrown into delightful chaos. Imagine a moth circling endlessly torn between two competing beacons. Over time, species would evolve to choose one moon's light over the other, perhaps becoming more active during a specific moon's cycle. Here's an unusual twist. Plants wouldn't be left out of this lunar influence. While they don't see moonlight as we do, certain plants are sensitive to nighttime illumination, adjusting their flowering or growth patterns to the lunar cycle. With two cycles to work from, some plants might bloom twice as often, while others might time their growth to a rare period when both moons are full, bathing the night in near daylight. The oceans, already transformed by double tides, would become an even richer stage for lunar-driven life. Coral reefs, which in our reality often spawn in sync with the moon, might develop two different mass spawning events, one for each moon's full phase. This could create vast underwater spectacles of life and color, multiple times a month, feeding entire food chains. As humans enter the picture, early hunter-gatherers would be deeply aware of the moon's influence. A clan living by the coast might notice that fishing is better during the overlap of certain phases. Inland tribes could time their hunts to nights when the smaller moon is new, offering more darkness for stealth. Over generations, knowledge of each moon's personality would be passed down like sacred lore stories wrapped in practical wisdom. Children would learn to watch the moons from an early age, not just for beauty, but for guidance. If the big moon rises before the little, a parent might say, "The deer will drink later tonight." These observations would shape survival itself. Of course, in human cultures, two moons would mean two deities, or perhaps one goddess with two faces. Myths would weave them into siblings, lovers, rivals, or parent and child. Their alignment in the sky could be seen as a blessing, their separation as a warning. And just as eclipses stir awe in our history, the rare moments when one moon passes in front of the other would inspire festivals, prophecies, and art for millennia. In the quieter corners of the world, the moons would shape private personal experiences too. Imagine sitting by a campfire in this ancient world, watching firelight flicker in harmony with the glow of two moons overhead. The warmth of the fire on your skin would be matched by the cool silver and gold light on your face. You'd hear the distant rush of a river swollen by tides, the rustle of an animal moving just beyond the circle of light, and you'd know deep in your bones that everything around you is part of a shared lunar rhythm. And here's a light-hearted image in a world with 2 moons. Werewolf stories would be twice as complicated. Which moon triggers the change? Or does it take both full at the same time to cause the transformation? Imagine the arguments at village gatherings. No, it's the little one that does it. My uncle swears he saw it happen. In this double moon, Earth evolution's brushstrokes would be subtle, but unmistakable. Over countless generations, life would adapt to a sky that never looks quite the same 2 nights in a row, and every living thing, plant, animal, human, would carry a trace of the twin moons in its body, its habits, and its stories. Under 2 moons, stories arrive before writing does. You sit by embers that pulse like tiny hearts, while elders point at the twin lanterns of the night. One moon is the keeper, they say, slow and solemn. The other is the wanderer, quick to rise, quick to tease. In this gentle world, you learn lullabies by skylight, where gods feel as close as breath, and the horizon is a page that never runs out of ink. The flames whisper, the crickets keep time, and you listen to the way people stitch comfort to the sky. People give the discs personalities because it helps them feel the pattern beneath the mystery. Fisher clans ask the keeper for safe harbors and thick nets. Desert caravans whisper to the wanderer for swift travel and cool nights. Across the vast land of Pangaea, in this unified world, before the continents drift, the same twin lights are named again and again, in 100 tongues, and yet they always mean home. You hear them called sisters guardians, rivals a mother and her lively child. Each name is a soft agreement that the night has 2 hands to hold you. In your hands, you lift a clay tablet, still damp with river water. A priest astronomer has pressed neat marks into its skin, not just of days and harvests, but of the moments when the moons cross, shadowing each other like dancers. Ritual follows prediction when the smaller moon rides the larger's shoulder. Temple bells ring softly, and baskets of grain are set where the tide will carry them out. You breathe smoke and salt, and think gently that certainty is a kind of kindness that math, when it meets the heart, becomes a festival. Here the myths swell. Some say the 2 were born from a shattered pearl flung out of the sea. Others say they are sisters who promised never to sleep at the same time, so the world would never feel alone. In mountain villages, you hear that one is a hunter and the other a cook, which honestly is a very efficient domestic arrangement for celestial roommates. Light joke 1, a child insists, the cook moon also washes dishes. The sky, being dignified, refuses to comment. Down in the reed marshes, grandmothers swear that if you lay 2 mirrors on the ground during twin crescents, dreams will learn your name and find you faster. Then a hinge of history arrives on a single afternoon. The sun thins, the air cools, and animals fall silent. You witness a total eclipse, the smaller moon sliding precisely over the solar face, while the larger keeps a stately distance. In your reality, this recalls the famous eclipse of 585 BCE, when Thales reportedly predicted the sun's vanishing and turned a battle to truce. Here, with 2 lunar clocks to untangle, astronomer priests do something harder. They forecast both the path and the hour, calm the city before the shadow arrives, and ring the bells, not in panic, but in pride. Fear softens into curiosity. Soldiers lower spears. Children lift smoked glass to the sky. The eclipse becomes a lesson the gods love devotion, but they are pleased too by careful thought. The stories don't end, they adapt. Scribes copy hymn cycles that braid the phases together, waxing keeper, with waning wanderer, new, with gibbous, bright with shy. You help ink the margins, little boats under twin crescents, water striped with light. Festivals grow like coral around reliable dates. Twin full nights become times for marriages, treaty signings, and because humans are gloriously human, huge markets with fried dough that inevitably powders your clothes. Light joke 2, You tell the vendor you're buying it for the moons. The vendor winks and adds an extra piece for the tides. Under the twin lights, navigation becomes mythic and practical at once. Shepherds in the steppe learn that when the wanderer chases the keeper across the southern sky, spring storms soften. Sailors cut notches into oars for each alignment that makes coastal currents kinder. In this unified world, the moons are compass and calendar promise and proverb. Children skip rope to rhymes that carry ephemerides in their bones. Their games keep time with gravitation, laughter tugging at the dark like a small tide. You lean into quieter tales. In northern forests, a grandmother tells how the smaller moon once lost its way and hid for 9 nights, and wolves howled to guide it home. In river deltas, people set bowls of water on windowsills to catch moonlight for the sick. You smile knowing that while the ritual is poetic, extra nighttime brightness does steady sleep cycles, and a calmer household is its own good medicine. In a stone-built city, a mason carves 2 shallow basins on a rooftop so that moonlit reflections kiss at their edges every month. Lovers climb the stairs to watch and leave flowers in the seam. Here's your unusual fact for the night under a bright full moon, rain can paint a faint rainbow. A moonbow so pale you might miss it unless your eyes are patient. With 2 moons, those ghostly arcs can double or overlap thin silver parentheses cradling the world. Somewhere a poet writes that between those parentheses rests every unsent love letter. Somewhere a child tries to run to meet the rainbow and comes back with wet shoes and a grin wider than the harbor. Temples rise where observation and devotion share a roof. Courtyards are lined with shadow catchers' smooth pillars showing 2 knife-edged silhouettes at once, so priests can mark angles and set feast days. Monks grind alabaster to draw twin spirals on vellum mapping cycles that take decades to repeat. Behind their quiet labor is a practical heart. When the moons pace the sky, just so fish run, rivers swell, roads dry. Myth may be the story you tell. Timing is the story you use. You walk a cliff path into a port powdered with salt. The market calls with cinnamon and braziers. Above the moons, drift apart like friends who know they'll meet again after errands. A troupe performs The Quarrel of the Two, a comic play in which the moons argue over who lights ancient lovers best. The punchline is sensible and silly. At once every scene ends with "use a lantern." Light joke 3, the lantern vendor is suspiciously close to the director and keeps bowing every time the line lands. The crowd roars, then hums a lullaby. Even jokes become rituals when told under the right light. Even as laughter fades, you feel how these twin symbols hold a culture together without freezing it in place. When drought tightens its hand, prayers go to the keeper to pull tides higher upstream. When floods rattle, doorframes people sing to the wanderer to walk more softly. Across the vast land of Pangaea, villages share songs by river and caravan. Different melodies carrying familiar moons, and the shared sky becomes a language no border can unteach. The 2 circles above keep communities braided in a way laws alone never could. You pause by a cabinet where an old instrument ticks. Cams and gears translate lunar cycles into moving pegs that ring tiny bells, 1 bell for the larger moon's quarter, another for the smaller's opposition, a third for the rare eclipse path that touches the city's latitude. It is an ancestor of the Antikythera-like wonders you will know later, and though it squeaks, it keeps time well enough to plant fields and schedule pilgrimages. The mind that loves gods and the mind that loves numbers meet in the middle, shake hands, and share a quiet bench. Night lengthens, fires draw down to coals, and the tide turns in the harbor, combing starlight into ripples. You taste the metallic breath of the sea and tilt your head. The keeper is high now, a steady silver. The wanderer, lower and warmer, cradles the rooftops. Under both, you understand what the oldest myths have always wanted to make meaning large enough to sleep inside. 2 moons do not cancel each other. They teach balance weight, and counterweight song, and echo question, and answer a lullaby you carry in your chest as you close your eyes and let the stories slip into dream. With 2 moons circling above, farming would follow a rhythm far more intricate than in your world. Out here in the fertile valleys, the soil holds stories of both lunar pulls, double tides, double shadows, double calendars. You can almost feel the farmers' minds bending toward the sky each evening, reading patterns in silver and gold before deciding when to sow, water, or reap. In our reality, many ancient farmers planted according to the single moon's phases root crops, with the new moon leafy greens as it waxed, and grains when it was full. Here, those guidelines would need rewriting. You'd have not 1, but 2 changing discs, each with its own cycle of darkness and light. Imagine the options you could plant when both moons are waxing for rapid growth, or when one is waning and the other full for hardier, slower maturing crops. Entire systems of agriculture would evolve to sync with combinations of phases, and these combinations would only repeat every few years. The result: farming that is as much astronomy as agriculture. Villages would employ skykeepers, men and women, trained to track the moon's motions with carved sticks, knotted cords, and shadow-marked stones. They would walk the fields at dawn, measuring the angle between the moons, at set times their notes shaping not just planting, but irrigation schedules, harvest festivals, and even rest days for workers. Here's an unusual fact in our world. Some plants can detect extremely faint light levels down to the brightness of starlight. With 2 moons, nights would rarely be truly dark, and certain crops could actually photosynthesize slightly under the combined glow. In this alternate Earth, you might see fields of silver-lit barley, gently swaying in the night breeze, still drinking in light after the sun has gone. Of course, water management would be just as vital. Double moons mean more complex tides in rivers and estuaries, affecting irrigation channels. In coastal farmlands, some canals might draw in seawater during rare twin-pull high tides, allowing for saltwater-tolerant crops, like certain grains and edible reeds. Inland farmers might watch for river surges, triggered by far-off tidal events, timing planting, so seedlings aren't washed away by a moon-made flood. The moon's phases would also influence pest control. Insects, as you've seen, respond to lunar light. Farmers might notice certain pests appearing only when the smaller moon is full and the larger is waning, and plan their planting to avoid peak infestations. Bird migrations, often tied to lunar cycles, would also become a tool for pest management, with fields prepared to attract flocks just in time to eat the insects. Culture would grow around this lunar agriculture. Planting seasons would be marked by moon festivals, perhaps one in the early spring, when both moons wax together, symbolizing abundance, and another in autumn, when they wane, signaling rest. You might hear songs sung in the fields that match the rhythm of sowing seeds, each verse calling to one moon or the other for blessing. Farmers would also share jokes, of course, because no matter the era, farmers tease each other about the weather. Light joke 1. My carrots failed because the moons argued again. Light joke 2. At least your moons talk. Mine just ignore the fields entirely. Humor softens the long days and the inevitable mistakes in prediction. In towns, market days might be set by the double quarter, a rare alignment, when each moon is at exactly a quarter phase, casting 2 perfectly balanced shadows. Merchants would claim their goods are double blessed if sold on such a day, and customers, superstitious or not, would pay a little extra. Bakers might even produce special 2-moon loaves, round breads, with one pale top and one darker golden half, mimicking the night sky. The practical and the mystical would always be intertwined. If the moons aligned unusually bright during planting, and a bumper crop followed that year's, farmers might attribute the bounty to celestial favor. The pattern would be recorded, analyzed, and celebrated, even if the real cause was simply good rain and no locusts. Over time, the data and the belief would become inseparable, and no one would see the need to untangle them. Standing in one of these fields at dusk, you'd feel the weight of centuries of observation in the air. The skykeeper, her hair bound in a cloth to keep the dust out, would point to the eastern horizon, where the smaller moon rises a thin crescent. The larger moon, already high, gleams nearly full. 2 nights from now, she might say softly, "We plant the beans." And you'd understand that in this world, agriculture isn't just about soil and seeds. It's a conversation with the heavens, spoken in light and shadow, tide and time. You step onto a moonlit quay where water folds and unfolds like silk, and navigation becomes more than lines on a chart. It becomes a conversation with the sky. 2 moons pour twin paths of light across the harbor. 2 bright ladders pointing outward to the horizon, and you feel your hands want a tiller, the way a dancer wants music. The air tastes of salt and tar. Rope creaks, masts murmur. Gulls rewrite the night with quick white strokes. Under this doubled lantern, you're not lost. You're learning how to be found. Across the vast land of Pangaea, when it was still one body, and coastlines were grand curves, you would have watched early sailors test small craft in lagoons, lit by the keeper and the wanderer. They learned the way the double shadows fall on wavelets, how the brighter track marks deeper water, while the softer golden track ripples over shoals. Your eyes would learn too. In this world, the sea speaks in stereo swell, from tides braided by 2 pulse currents that lean and then lean back to an older rhythm, a soft tug of war made visible in the surface sheen. Night steering belongs to the sky, so you look up. Stars keep their ancient places, but 2 moons add moving reference points, and mariners keep notebooks of angles when the smaller moon stands a handspan to the left of the great cruciform of the southern sky. Set your bow west. When both moons halo a bright winter star, adjust 3 points to port, to meet the ocean river that will carry you home. Celestial navigation doesn't vanish. It becomes richer, more cross-checked, more human. Each entry a line of poetry with numbers in it. Here's your unusual fact. In our world, dung beetles can navigate using the Milky Way rolling treasure in straight lines by starlight. In this twin moon Earth, even tiny navigators inherit the night. You smile imagining a beetle pausing at the dock's edge, consulting not just the galactic smear, but 2 neat moons, then saying in beetle politely, "Ah, the wanderer is waxing. I'll take the shore route." Somewhere a sailor adopts the beetle as a mascot and names the ship Scarab because humor is the compass that points toward calm. Major history draws a clear line across your chart. The Longitude Act of 1714, a reward placed on the table to solve. Where am I east to west in your reality? John Harrison's marine chronometer finally steadies that answer with H4 in the 1760s precision caged in brass and spring. In this 2-moon timeline, the pressure remains, but the road branches. The old lunar distance method measuring the angle between the moon and key stars becomes a 2-lunar discipline centuries earlier. Apprentices learn to take distances to both moons, then use tables predicting each moon's sky path to solve for time, then for longitude. Double data doesn't erase the need for a perfect clock. It buys you forgiveness when clouds eat half the heavens. When H4, or its cousin by another name, finally ticks on a damp cabin shelf, it arrives to partner, not replace a culture already fluent in lunar geometry. The event still matters the day a captain checks his chronometer against twin lunar distances and grins into the spray, is the day voyages stop being wagers and become promises. Shoreside overland travelers take the moons as teachers. Caravan leaders step out at night because the air is kinder, and 2 lights flatten the fear in dunes. You read the desert's soft script, ripples, streaks, cross-bedding without a torch. You taste the chill. You hear the camel's slow basso. In forests, pathfinders place split logs so that when both moons clear, the canopy twin beams align across the cuts, like sightlines on a rifle. In tundra, sleds run under a brightness that makes the ice sing faintly, and the driver reads not just the stars, but the color of shadows, The keeper's blue-gray warns of depth. The wanderer's warm smear hints at crusted windpack. Navigation is no longer just where is north. It is which light tells the safer story. On the sea again, the twin moons complicate tides into a language you learn by ear. Charts use symbols for phase pairings, a small circle nested in a larger crescent beside a gibbous, and harbors publish. Moonbraid simplified streaks that show current set and drift hour by hour. An old pilot, a sleeve shiny with salt, teaches you a trick: scrape a bucket across the surface and watch the V it carves. The sharper the double-scored V, the more the moons are working together, the more you should favor the lee. You nod, file it away, and because sailors everywhere are incorrigible, paint the tip of your nose with tar as a joke to see how long it takes the greenest deckhand to mention it. Light joke 1, it takes him 3 hours. He apologizes to your nose. Light exists to find edges, and 2 moons make edges generous. Lighthouses in this world still keep their solemn watch, but keepers use paired shutters to test moonlight on fog, reading visibility from the way twin shadows fuzz and separate on the lens room's wall. You climb the spiral stairs, feel the stone cool against your palm, and step into glass. The lamp breathes. Far below, breakers comb the bar. The keeper logs a double-clear night, both halos, crisp beam cutting 40 miles, and pours you tea strong enough to argue. Light joke 2, they call it engine grease. You ask for sugar. The sugar surrenders. When storms come, and they do, the moons step back and let the barometer speak. But even then, mariners use the twin lights as anchors for fear. In the teeth of it, someone will say, "When the wanderer rides high again, we reef less, and the sentence will carry some of the weight the timbers cannot. And when the black lifts and both moons burn holes in the cloud, you'll mark the time with a soft pencil and feel your lungs remember how to be wide." In port cities, schools of navigation bloom like diatoms, clean, geometric, luminous with method. Students stand at brass sextants, as if at pulpits taking paired sights, then argue amiably over refraction corrections in air thick with chalk. You thumb through almanacs laced with tables for each moon. Parallax, semi-diameter limb choice, and there's a foldout with a neat trick, solve. Both lunar distances average the times and lose a sliver of error to the forgiving middle. Sailors have never met a redundancy they didn't christen luck. Humor keeps its watch, too. Dockside a sign reads, "Lost, try the other moon." Light joke 3 below it, someone has chalked. If both fail, ask a beetle. You laugh, and the laugh stretches the shadows just enough to make the day's knots loosen. And then the quieter refrains return, the repetitions that make a world feel like a single instrument. In this unified world, twin moons don't divide the night. They braid it. Across the vast land of Pangaea, across the later continents, across straits and channels and capes, the same practice spreads. Check the sky. Listen to the water. Trust the beat that 2 lights lay down together. You learn to keep that beat with your hands on rope and your eyes on the rim of the world, and after a while, it keeps you. Stand on a cliffside above a restless inlet, and you can feel the future humming in the water. Those twin moons have been pulling and pushing the oceans for billions of years, and now humans have begun to dream of using that motion for more than fishing and travel. In this world with tides amplified and rhythms doubled, the leap into moon-powered machines would arrive centuries earlier than in yours. Here the idea starts: simple wooden water wheels set in tidal channels. But instead of turning only twice a day, as the tide flows in and out, these wheels can spin more often thanks to overlapping lunar cycles. A village might see 4 or even 6 strong tidal pushes in a day, enough to grind grain pump water uphill, or saw planks without relying entirely on muscle or wind. You picture an early harbor where merchants load sacks of flour marked with a symbol 2 circles one inside the other that says "powered by the moons." In our real history, tidal mills first appear around the Middle Ages. In this alternate timeline, they arrive in antiquity. The extra gravitational pull means they're more efficient, and once the principle is proven, coastal, cities race to harness the energy. Stone-built tide gates are constructed to trap the incoming surge and release it through narrow sluices, driving massive wooden gears. Not every attempt works. Some designs stall in the middle of the cycle. Others get wrecked by a super tide, but the failures are just as instructive as the successes. Here's an unusual fact. In our real world, certain places like the Bay of Fundy in Canada have tides over 16 meters high. In a double moon Earth, there could be multiple such locations along every ocean basin, creating natural hubs for tidal industry. Imagine ships deliberately docking at these hubs, not for trade goods, but for the sheer energy to repair hulls or pump bilge water. As centuries pass, the technology evolves. Artisans create tidal clocks with 2 moving arms, one for each moon, so engineers can predict the most powerful overlaps. These clocks are displayed publicly in markets and ports, their faces painted with blue and gold. They're ticking a reminder that the sky still governs the ground. In the age of exploration, when ships cross oceans for months at a time, the moon's extra pull becomes a navigational advantage. Harbors with moon mills offer fresh water distilled by tidal pumps, cooled in clay cisterns. Travelers marvel at seeing lamps lit in coastal inns by generators driven entirely by the ebb and flow of water. In some cities, tidal mills hum day and night, providing a steady rhythmic soundtrack that locals barely notice until a rare calm falls on the water. Of course, the moon's mechanical gifts aren't limited to water. Farmers inland adapt the principle to river systems, whose flow is amplified by tidal backwash, channeling the surge into irrigation wheels. Some inventors even experiment with lunar hammers, weighted beams, lifted by tide-powered cams, pounding metal or stone without a human hand. And because the timing of the tides is predictable, workshops run on a schedule more precise than any candle clock could give. With industrialization, the scene changes dramatically. Engineers begin to build large tidal barrages, huge walls across estuaries studded with turbines. In our real history, these projects are relatively rare. Here they're central. Nations compete to see who can produce the most power from their coastline, and new cities rise where the twin moons' pull is strongest. The maps of political power start to shift toward the sea. And then there's the science, the deep curiosity that springs from seeing machinery and moonlight in constant dialogue. Astronomers calculate exactly how much energy the moons give to Earth engineers, convert those numbers into usable power, and philosophers muse about the poetry of walking in a city where the light above and the hum beneath both come from the same source. Naturally, there's humor in it too. Light joke 1, dockworkers tell newcomers. Careful, if you look at the moons too long, you'll get charged for electricity. Light joke 2 millers claim the smaller moon makes sweeter flour, though no one agrees why. And in this world, tide watching isn't just a pastime, it's a profession. People gather to cheer the moon rush when both tides peak together, sending a foaming surge into the gates. Vendors sell snacks, musicians play, and children wave little paper moons on sticks. What makes it remarkable is how seamlessly it fits into daily life. From the moment you wake to the rhythmic splash of a mill race to the time you drift off with moonlight falling across your bed, the twin moons are part of the work and rest of the planet. They are both clock and engine, their invisible threads pulling not just water, but history itself forward. Somewhere far from the coast, a child asks what it's like to see the tide gates open. You'd tell them it's like hearing the world take a deep breath in silver and gold, a breath that's been exhaled since the beginning of time, and in this world, thanks to 2 moons, it never quite runs out. Flags do more than flap. They tell you who you are supposed to be. Under 2 moons, banners and standards gather extra meanings, and you feel the way colors and circles turn armies into stories you can carry in your chest. In quiet courtyards, you see emblems split between the keeper and the wanderer cities, and kings picking favorites, swearing that their moon is the luckier one, the nobler one, the proper lantern for victory. It's astonishing how fast a cymbal becomes a drumbeat, and how a drumbeat becomes a march. You can trace it in training grounds where recruits chant timing drills to lunar meters advance when the smaller moon is rising. Hold when the larger is at apogee. Smiths etch slim crescents or broad discs onto belt plates. Quartermasters ink phase charts beside marching tables. With two moons, night never quite belongs to fear so. Commanders grow bolder with nocturnal maneuvers. Double-lit terrain makes ambush less certain and coordination more possible. Supply trains creep faster. Signal flags can be read at distances that used to swallow orders whole. You feel the cool light on your forearms, the tug in your gut when both orbs climb the sky together, and you know why generals watch the horizon like gamblers counting cards. Religion, politics, and war are cousins who borrow each other's clothes. In this world, priesthoods that favor the keeper preach discipline lineage and the slow turn of fortune. City-states that pledge to the wanderer sing of change, reform, and daring. Across the vast land of Pangaea, later shattered into continents, but still braided by old stories, border stones carry paired carvings, one moon for law, one for mercy, one for shore, one for river. Sermons drift into manifestos. Manifestos become muster rolls. You taste dust in the parade ground and hear two different hymns drift from opposite barracks, each one certain it's the original melody. A single evening shows how the sky can walk into a war council and put its feet up. The year is 413 BCE. Your reality remembers it for the Athenian disaster in Sicily during the Peloponnesian War. In this twin-moon history, the harbor of Syracuse gleams with two reflections as the Athenians finally decide to cut their losses and slip away. Torches are hidden, oars are wrapped, hearts are hammering. Then the smaller moon slides into Earth's shadow, an abrupt coppery bloom, and the larger moon hanging high and pale stares down like an unsleeping eye. Priests are summoned. Omens are debated. The delay that followed in our world stretches even longer here, because two omens are harder to argue with than one. Syracuse tightens its harbor boom. You can smell pitch salt, and a decision as heavy as an anchor wait for a more favorable pairing of the moons. Waiting becomes doom. You watch history hinge on timing and light, and you feel the chill of cause and effect walking past your shoulder. Here's your unusual fact for the night. Even chickens notice eclipses often going quiet and heading to their roosts as if evening has fallen. In a world with two moons, barnyards would occasionally perform this little drama, while soldiers recheck straps and captains weigh counsel. It's hard not to smile imagining a general trying to look authoritative, while a rooster utterly convinced calls it lights out. Light joke one, someone always mutters, "Sir, even the poultry recommends retreat." Back at the map table, you find double calendars pinned under daggers. Wars are fought on logistics as much as courage, so tide heights keyed to both lunar cycles matter. Amphibious crossings, river fords, mud seasons, with twin pulls windows for safe crossings, shift like a lock that opens on a pattern instead of a single key. A clever quartermaster schedules the movement of wheeled engines for the low-tide lull between peaks. An even cleverer one hides supply boats under the dazzle of twin full nights so that watchfires can't separate ripple from reflection. You run your finger down a neat column, Morrow Wanderer Gibbous Keeper Crescent. Fords passable at third bell. War is made of such small sentences. Propaganda loves a sky it can photograph with a finger. Cities issue coins stamped with their chosen moon, and victories are retold as proof that heaven prefers one sigil. A victory won under a high keeper becomes a parable about patience. A victory snatched when the wanderer is low becomes a lesson about surprise. When both moons are full, treaties are signed because even enemies can't resist a night that bright. You feel how repetition becomes comfort. In this unified world, timing your courage to the sky becomes its own kind of prayer. Scholars and engineers, blessedly stubborn, push against superstition, even while respecting the clockwork above. Siege masters invent lunar ladders, notched timbers, cut to match shadows at a specific hour, so that when twin beams lie perfectly on the steps, a unit can climb without lanterns. Signal Corps refine heliographs into lunographs using polished shields to bounce moonlight across valleys in coded pulses. The practical keeps whispering to the poetic until they're hard to tell apart. And yet the sky keeps its jokes. Light Joke 2, a captain blames a defeat on Mercury in retrograde, and the staff philosopher rolls his eyes so hard they almost invent a third moon. Soldiers name their tents after phases wax or wane too full, and a veteran with a crescent tattoo will swear it makes his dice lucky. In the canteen, someone sketches the moons as grumpy roommates on a chalkboard. Please rinse your craters after use. Laughter is oil where fear would otherwise be grit. You walk a moon-bright field after the clamor fades, and notice how the ground remembers. Double shadows stitch eras into one fabric hoplites, and horsemen pikemen, and gunners all silhouettes folded into the same gentle silver. Two moons didn't invent rivalry. They doubled the metaphors made timing king, and gave commanders a prettier clock. They also gave peacemakers a stage, those rare twin-full nights when cities lower their voices and even guards lean on spears to hum the same lullaby. In a double-lit world, you learn that compromise can look like shared light on the same river. The science never sits out, even here. Astronomers in hilltop forts refine eclipse predictions with tables that track both lunar nodes. Statisticians in capital cities quietly compare outcomes to phases and find less fate than rumor claims. It turns out that troops with clean water, decent pay, and good boots win more often regardless of which lantern is on duty. Commanders listen, at least the wise ones, and begin to say, "We start at third bell after moonrise, because the mud will hold our weight, not because a god is grinning." When peace finally stitches itself back into borders, sculptors carve memorials with two inlaid discs that catch real moonlight on anniversaries. Families picnic there and tell stories that soften edges without erasing them. A veteran ties a ribbon on a rail and watches twin paths of light fold across the lake. You stand beside him and hear the gentle catechism that has threaded this world since its earliest nights: two lights balanced, two pulls braided, two ways to be brave by charging and by putting the spear down. Before you go, one last smile for the road. Light Joke 3, a new recruit asks which moon the army prays to before battle. The sergeant says, "Whichever one's rising behind us." Practical piety, the oldest kind. You look up. The keeper holds steady. The wanderer slides just above the hills. Across the vast land of Pangaea, across all the lands. It became the same lesson hangs in the dark. Choose your symbols, count your rations, read the light, and remember that glory is a tide, stronger when two pulls are in your favor, but never as dependable as a well-packed cart. The wars fade into stories, but the curiosity remains. Once the banners are furled and the last echoes of marching boots have drifted into the past, the moons keep swinging in their silent arcs, daring people to understand them. Science in this two-moon world doesn't just look up, it climbs. In your reality, early astronomy was already a feat of patient observation. Here, the challenge doubles. Every village with a clear horizon might have a moon wall, a line of carved notches that mark where each moon rises and sets during the year. Standing before such a wall, you can almost feel the hours poured into watching, marking, correcting. The smaller moon moves faster. Its path against the stars shifts more from night to night. The larger moves more slowly, with a steadier, more deliberate glide. The trick is teasing apart their rhythms and then bringing them back together in prediction. One breakthrough comes in the great port city of Eridassa. A scholar there invents the twin armillary, two concentric brass spheres that can be rotated independently, each representing a moon's orbit. By adjusting the spheres, you can recreate any sky on any date, past or future. This allows priests to plan festivals decades ahead, merchants to schedule tidal shipping routes years in advance, and farmers to prepare for rare alignments that promise exceptional growing conditions. Here's an unusual fact in our world. The moon's orbit is tilted about 5 degrees to Earth's path around the sun, which is why eclipses aren't monthly. In this alternate Earth, each moon's tilt is slightly different, and their crossing points or nodes drift over time. Astronomers here map double eclipse seasons when both moons can shadow the sun within weeks of each other, turning those months into periods of intense observation and public wonder. Of course, the tools for this work grow more refined. By the medieval period in this timeline, observatories boast paired sighting tubes mounted on swivels, allowing simultaneous measurements of both moons' angular distances to key stars. Charts blossom with not just one lunar column, but two, each line annotated with phase elevation and relative position. And while in our reality, predicting eclipses was an achievement of select civilizations here, it becomes almost commonplace, though predicting both moons' eclipses in the same season remains the work of geniuses. Science also finds a playful side. Light joke 1, a student misaligns the twin armillary and claims to have discovered a third moon. His teacher tells him to check for dust before announcing revolutions. Amateur skywatchers hold contests to see who can forecast the next rare double conjunction when the moons pass so close they nearly touch in the sky. Winners get bragging rights, and sometimes in smaller towns a pie baked in the shape of the two orbs. Gradually, astronomers realize that studying the moons isn't just about understanding them, it's about understanding Earth. The complex tug-of-war between the moons slightly changes the planet's spin shifts, ocean circulation, and even influences atmospheric tides. One coastal university builds a model half-sculpture, half-machine, showing the interplay of water, wind, and lunar gravity. Visitors stand mesmerized as tiny currents swirl through glass basins, proving that the sky doesn't just decorate the world, it sculpts it. The Renaissance in this world becomes a true double-lens era. Telescopes sprout in courtyards, their brass tubes aimed not at one familiar face, but at two. Artists peer through them to sketch the different crater patterns, lava plains, and mountain ridges. The larger moon bears great dark seas, like our own moon. The smaller is more heavily cratered, its surface rougher and less weathered by time. Side-by-side drawings hang in guild halls like portraits of siblings, each beautiful in a different way. With telescopes comes a surge in mapping. The moons are charted so thoroughly that navigators can use their surfaces for guidance reading craters, like constellations. Ship logs begin to include notes like departed under Typhon Crater, Rising Keeper, 2 days past full. The idea that you can steer by a moon's surface rather than just its position is a direct gift of having two to compare. And science begins to touch something deeper. Philosophers ask why the moons exist at all, why they dance instead of collide, why their cycles seem to mirror certain life rhythms. In our world, the moon has long been linked to fertility planting and emotion. In this one, scholars debate whether the presence of two moons has doubled those ties or simply given humanity two mirrors in which to find itself. Even the humor stays. Light joke 2, during a lecture on orbital mechanics, a student asks, "So if the moons switched places, would we all walk backwards?" The professor sighs and says, "Only the goats, and they'd enjoy it." Observatories sometimes host open nights where families come to watch both moons through telescopes, the air smelling of roasted nuts and ink from the printers, producing fresh star charts. The most devoted astronomers keep records not just of the moon's motions, but of how people react to them. One diary notes tonight both full. Laughter on the streets lasted until dawn. Another wanderer in eclipse keeper waxing. Fishermen stayed in port not for tide, but for beauty. Science here doesn't wall itself off from culture. It writes in the margins of every human story. And you sitting atop the observatory's roof in the cool night air begin to see why. In this world, the moons are not a puzzle to be solved and set aside. They are companions. Each equation, each diagram, each careful measure is part of an ongoing friendship between the people of Earth and the lights that have guided them for as long as anyone has looked up. And for good measure, Light Joke 3 Astronomy is just astrology with homework. In this world, maybe it's a little bit of both. The domes of the city glow below you, lit by lanterns' moonlight, and the quiet pride of a civilization that has learned to read not just the sky, but itself. The moment humanity looks up and wonders, can we go there, is inevitable. But in this two-moon world, the question splits in two. Which moon comes first, the keeper steady and stately, or the wanderer smaller, swifter, and a little more unpredictable? The debate isn't just scientific, it's cultural. Entire nations declare their preference. Across the vast land of Pangaea's descendants, you hear schoolchildren chanting slogans for their home moon, as if choosing sides in a game that will be written in rocket fuel. In our reality, rockets had to prove themselves one destination at a time. Here, the challenge is doubled, but also enticing two nearby worlds to study, to compare, to conquer. The first space programs weigh the costs. The Keeper offers stability easier to navigate toward, with fewer orbital surprises. The Wanderer is closer at its nearest approach, but dances around more erratically, demanding precision burns and mid-course corrections. The engineers' notebooks, already smudged with coffee and graphite, find their conversations looping back to the same point. Whichever one we choose, the other will be watching. The first major milestone comes when unmanned probes, sleek cones, bristling with antennae, are launched toward both moons in close succession. This double mission is deliberate. By sending sister craft to each moon, scientists can return comparative data on terrain gravity and surface chemistry. The results astonish the world. The Keeper's surface is familiar in its basalt plains and dust. The Wanderer is a jagged museum of impacts, its crust older and less weathered, with strange mineral deposits gleaming in deep craters. Here's your unusual fact in our world. Apollo 11 astronauts reported a subtle moon dust smell when they brought lunar dust into the module, a scent like spent gunpowder. In this alternate Earth, the first crew to land on the Wanderer reports something sharper, almost metallic sweet, and poets will forever insist it's the smell of a world that has been watching us more closely than we realized. The race to land humans is more than a competition between nations. It's a symbolic completion of an ancient relationship. The Keeper's mission launches first carrying a multinational crew trained to speak in 2 languages and think in 3 dimensions. You can feel the stillness in cities as people gather around televisions, radios, and open squares. The landing is a success. Boot prints press into dust older than recorded history, and the flag planted there bears not a single emblem, but 2 circles intertwined. Only months later, the Wanderer receives its first visitors. The approach is hair-raising, narrower gravitational margins, steeper descent, but the landing site rewards the risk. The astronauts discover cliffs casting shadows, even under twin moonlight from the Keeper above an alien sky, where Earth itself wears a crown of 2 companions. The photos Earth framed between the 2 moons become instant icons, posters in bedrooms and lecture halls alike. The practical benefits begin quickly. Instruments left on both moons create a precise triangulation system for Earth-based navigation, refining GPS decades ahead of schedule. Laser reflectors installed by the crews allow scientists to measure the distance to each moon with millimeter accuracy, tracking their slow drift and the subtle exchange of momentum between them. Energy companies begin to dream of solar farms on the moon's near sides, beaming power back to Earth. Of course, space travel brings its share of lighter moments. Light Joke 1 during a televised press conference, a reporter asks an astronaut which moon they liked better. The astronaut says, "I'll let you know after I've done the honeymoon package." On the Keeper's surface, a crew member drops a wrench, and in the moon's gentler gravity, it arcs almost in slow motion, leading mission control to nickname the spot Tinker's Hill. On the Wanderer, a pair of scientists accidentally photobomb their own geology panorama by waving at the camera in the middle of a timed exposure. As missions continue, the differences between the moons become part of the scientific record, and cultural lore. The Keeper earns a reputation as a base for long-term research, stable, predictable, a platform for telescopes, and training runs for Mars. The Wanderer becomes a destination for high-risk, high-reward exploration, mineral surveys, geological experiments, even deep crater diving with specialized rovers. The contrast appeals to human nature. Two paths to adventure, one steady, one wild. The next great leap is the construction of twin lunar stations, one on each moon, designed to operate in relay. Supplies can be staged between them, crews rotated in a cycle that keeps missions fresh and equipment maintained. The stations even develop their own unofficial mascots. The Keeper's is a tortoise painted on the main airlock. The Wanderer's a hare bounding across a cargo hatch, an old joke given new life in the vacuum. Light joke 2, visiting crews start swapping patches, and soon the hare on the Keeper's station is wearing a tiny tortoise shell. Back on Earth, school science programs expand to include both lunar environments in their lessons. Children build scale models of the two moons, marking landing sites with pins. Amateur radio clubs compete to bounce signals off each moon and catch the faint echo of their own voices returning from space. When rare alignments bring the moons close together in the sky, public squares fill with telescopes, and you can hear the low hum of 1,000 conversations, questions, dreams, and the occasional marriage proposal timed to the moment the two moons nearly touch. Science pushes forward. Laboratories on Earth analyze moon rock samples to trace their shared origin in that ancient collision. The results suggest something even more profound. While the Keeper formed mostly from Earth's crust, the Wanderer retains more material from the impacting body, making it a kind of preserved time capsule from the earliest days of the solar system. The knowledge deepens the sense of connection. Both moons are siblings, but one carries the family resemblance more strongly. The other, the echo of a stranger. And for balance, light joke 3, a late-night host quips, 2 moons, 2 space programs, and still no one's built me a lunar coffee shop. Priorities, people. Looking up at the night sky now, you no longer see just lights. You see destinations, laboratories, and bridges between worlds. The Keeper and the Wanderer have stopped being only companions. They are now places where human laughter, breath, and footsteps have joined the silence. And still, even as rockets lift and land, you have the sense that the moons are watching back, as if waiting for the next question we haven't thought to ask yet. Now the world has grown used to looking up and seeing not just 2 moons, but 2 homes, and the double sky is part of everything from engineering plans to children's doodles in school notebooks. Cities no longer just measure themselves by their tallest towers or fastest trains. They measure by how well they've woven the Keeper and the Wanderer into the fabric of daily life. In the capital of one coastal nation, the skyline is designed with intentional moon corridors, streets aligned, so that during certain seasons, the 2 moons rise together at the far end, framed perfectly between buildings. Couples stroll there in the evenings, watching the silver and gold discs lift over the water, the air buzzing with conversation, and the low rumble of trams. The site is so famous that real estate listings boast full double moon view from balcony. Technology adapts as well. Satellite constellations are planned with the moon's gravitational influences in mind. Their orbits tweaked to remain stable in this slightly more complicated environment. Communications companies rent time on arrays that can bounce signals off either moon, creating a backup system that makes network outages almost impossible. You might get a text from a friend across the ocean that has literally brushed the surface of the Keeper before reaching you. Here's your unusual fact: in our world, we've used the moon to bounce radar and radio signals for decades. But with 2 moons, scientists would have a natural way to test how different surfaces reflect and scatter frequencies. The Wanderer's rougher terrain might create signal lace, beautiful chaotic interference patterns that engineers learn to predict and exploit. It's the kind of problem that would drive a physics student to frustration and then make them beam with pride when they solved it. Public life reflects the moons everywhere. Streetlights in some cities are fitted with dimmers that adjust based on moonlight-saving energy when both are bright. Museums host moonlight hours opening late so visitors can tour exhibits under the natural glow streaming through skylights. Parks host monthly double shadow nights when art installations are positioned to cast overlapping silhouettes, creating living sculptures that shift as the moons move. And then there are the festivals. Twin eclipses, when one moon partially shadows the other, are occasions for days-long celebrations. In one riverfront city, floating lanterns are released in pairs, each tied with a wish. They drift downstream, swaying gently in the current, glowing under the very lights that inspired them. People tell stories on these nights' tales of the moons, as siblings rivals lovers, or mirrors. Children fall asleep on picnic blankets as fireworks trace arcs between the two glowing discs. In daily culture, the moons are casual companions. Comedians make jokes about being more moonstruck than usual. Weather forecasters explain tides with ease, their diagrams showing the two moons like friendly co-workers passing in a hallway. Light Joke 1, a popular cartoon, shows the keeper and the wanderer, in an office one holding a coffee and saying, "I'll cover the east tide if you take the west." Architecture embraces the motif. Skyscrapers have twin spires mimicking the moon's shapes, while smaller towns favor clock towers with dual faces, one for each moon's cycle. Even playgrounds reflect it, merry-go-rounds, painted silver and gold swings that squeak in time with the moon's slow dance. And above it all, those orbs remain a nightly presence, unchanging, yet always new. Travel changes too. Airlines market moonrise flights, where passengers can watch both moons lift over the horizon at cruising altitude. Cruise ships schedule departures to coincide with twin full moons over open water, promising passengers the brightest nights at sea. Rail routes advertise windows aligned for moonset views over mountain passes. In this world, tourism is timed to the sky as much as to the seasons. Science keeps finding uses for them. Renewable energy grids integrate lunar mirrors, vast arrays of floating solar panels that also capture moonlight with specialized coatings storing it as low-grade thermal energy. It's not enough to power cities, but it's enough for lighting coastal boardwalks, running irrigation pumps, or charging beacons for small craft. Of course, the humor doesn't fade. Light Joke 2, someone online complains, "2 moons and still I can't find my car keys," sparking thousands of replies, suggesting try looking under the smaller one. Light Joke 3, a food truck offers moon pies in silver or gold icing and charges extra if you want both in the same box. And while modern life feels effortless, the ancient rhythms are still there. Fishermen rise at hours, dictated by phase charts, farmers plant and harvest, with an eye on the moon's interplay, and lovers still pause mid-conversation to point upward when something rare happens. A perfect alignment, an overlapping halo, a night so bright, it feels like the sky has leaned down to speak directly to them. From space, Earth glows differently now. Satellites capture the planet cradled by 2 moons, the keeper. Steady the wanderer in motion like a slow heartbeat you can see. The image appears in textbooks, advertisements, murals, and even tattoos. It's the kind of sight that reminds you this is a world shaped by 2 gravitational hands, a world where light and shadow are never quite the same from one night to the next. And still, for all the technology and celebration, there's a quiet side. You stand on a rooftop in a bustling city, the hum of life all around, and for a moment you notice how the moons float there unchanged. They don't rush. They don't demand. They simply keep watch, as they always have, on the moving tide of human life below. Far into the future, the moons keep their slow, patient watch, but nothing in the cosmos is truly still. Even from the comfort of this imagined Earth, you know the dance will one day change. Gravity is a storyteller with no hurry, and its plots can take millions of years to unfold. Over time, both moons drift farther from Earth, just as our real moon does in your world, about 4 centimeters a year. Here, the drift is more complicated. The keeper, heavier and more massive, edges outward steadily. The wanderer's path shifts in smaller, irregular bursts, sometimes pulled faster by the keeper's gravity, sometimes slowed by its own tug-of-war with Earth. Astronomers chart this slow migration, like a long goodbye. They publish simulations of the sky centuries from now, showing the moons farther apart, their eclipses rarer, their alignments less frequent. The tides change too. Without the close embrace of youth, the moon's pull weakens. The supertides that once roared into harbors soften to gentler swells. Coastal cities adapt. Their great tide gates become relics opened only for ceremonial floods during festivals. Fishermen still go to sea, but their calendars are simpler. The lunar braids looser the double pull, now just a faint echo of the old rhythm. One evening, scientists gather in a glass-walled observatory to watch a particularly rare event. The wanderer passes behind the keeper, hidden from Earth, for nearly an hour. In this quiet interval, the sky looks almost ordinary, as if the world had slipped into your own single-moon reality. People remark on how strange it feels, lonely even. When the smaller moon re-emerges, cheers rise from city streets and remote mountaintops alike. It's a reminder that absence can sharpen affection. Here's an unusual fact. In your reality, the moon is slowly leaving Earth's orbit, but billions of years from now, it may reach a point where tidal forces stall its drift. In this two-moon world, that balance could arrive sooner, especially for the keeper, locking it into a steady distance, while the wanderer continues its erratic journey outward. Future astronomers might watch generation after generation, as the smaller moon becomes a faint, slow-moving dot in the night sky before slipping away entirely. As centuries pass, cultures shift their myths. The keeper becomes the steadfast elder, the guardian who stayed. The wanderer becomes the child who went seeking new worlds. Festivals adapt to the changing reality, fewer alignments, but greater anticipation for them. When the two moons meet in the sky now, it is a rare, almost sacred event, and people travel hundreds of miles to watch. The last great scientific push toward the moons comes with the building of permanent habitats. On the keeper, a domed city gleams under an artificial twilight, its gardens fed by lunar greenhouses. On the wanderer, smaller outposts cling to crater rims, research stations, cataloging mineral wealth and subtle seismic shifts. But eventually practicality wins out. Maintaining both becomes costly, and one day, the final wanderer outpost shuts its airlock for the last time. Crews transfer to the keeper's settlement, leaving the smaller moon silent once more. Humor survives even in these quieter times. Light joke 1, the wanderer didn't leave us. We just stopped leaving lunch out. Light joke 2, a child asks why the smaller moon looks fainter now, and their parent says, it's playing hide and seek, and it's very good at it. Light joke 3, a mural in the keeper's colony, shows the two moons arm wrestling over Earth, with the caption, "We both won." And then comes the night when you realize how much has changed. You stand by the ocean, the air cool, and smelling faintly of salt, and you see only one moon, brilliant familiar, while the other hangs low and small near the horizon. It is still beautiful, but it feels like the end of a song you've known your whole life. The next generations will inherit a quieter sky, but they'll inherit the stories too. They'll still speak of the tides that once leapt high enough to flood streets for celebration. They'll still sing the songs timed to two rising discs, and they'll still point upward, tracing the keeper's steady path, remembering the wanderer's bright, quick visits. In the end, the twin moons are not just a feature of the sky, they are a lesson in balance in change, and in the beauty of shared time. Even as one drifts away, the other remains a silver lantern for nights, and a reminder that some companions, no matter how far they roam, always leave their light with you. So now, let the night settle fully around you. The world is quiet. The air is still. Above you, the keeper glides through a sea of stars, its surface aglow with the light of a distant sun. The wanderer is there, too smaller now, but still close enough to catch your eye if you know where to look. You let your gaze shift between them, feeling how the space between is not empty, it's full of memory. Every tide you've ever watched, every shadow you've seen cross the grass, every story told under these moons is still here, layered in the air, like the scent of rain on stone. You can almost hear the voices of people from centuries past, farmers timing their seeds, sailors watching the horizon, lovers whispering promises as both moons rose over them. They are all still part of this night, part of this light. The ocean sighs against the shore. A cool breeze moves through the trees, carrying the faint sound of water over rocks. The moons keep their slow, eternal rhythm, one steady one, restless. They don't rush. They don't falter. They simply keep going as they always have, as you will when you finally drift into sleep. Your eyelids grow heavy. The silver light softens, the gold dims, and the stars step closer to fill the spaces between. In the hush, you feel that the world is holding you, not just this place, but the whole of it, from mountain to ocean, from field to sky. The moons keep watch. They have always kept watch. And as their glow fades behind the veil of your closing eyes, you know they'll be there still waiting when you wake. Good night.